Get this started. Okay, so and then we're just gonna make this like an interview, and then you can feel free to elaborate as much as you want on any of these questions. And it's not really like concrete, it's just like if you have anything important you feel like you want to mention for this interview, then you can say it. And then you don't have to answer all of these questions if you don't feel like as if you're comfortable with them, and then we can like stop or like take a break at any time. It's completely up to you.
Okay.
Okay, so I would like to start off by asking you, what is your name?
My name is William Ray Gardiner, Gardiner, but I'm known primarily as Dick, D-I-C-K.
Alright. And then, what year were you born and where were you born?
I was born in 1931 in Water Valley, Mississippi.
Okay, so that's kind of just like the first thing. And then, Kyle, this is on, what's today's date?
Today's the 18th.
Yeah, today's the 18th, and this is in St. George's in the conference room. Okay, so first of all, who were your parents and what were their occupations?
Okay, my father was named Clifton Bell Gardiner, and my mother was Essie, E-S-S-I-E, Marie Gardiner, and they were farmers.
Oh, that's cool. I want to be a farmer one day. And then, do you have any siblings?
I had one brother, but he's since been deceased.
If you could you tell me his name?
He is Charles Edward Gardiner.
Right. And then, did he serve in the military?
Yes, he did.
And then, if so, did you ever see them during the war?
No.
Alright. And then, what were you doing before you entered the service?
I worked for Memphis Light Gas and Water Division almost a couple of years before I got selected in the draft.
And then, why did you choose that? Like, why did you choose like that job? Because I know like some people like to do this, some people like to do that. Was it just because, or?
Well, I went to business school here in Memphis, and I got a call that they were looking for someone that had accounting information.
Experience.
So I went to see them, and they hired me that same day.
Oh, that's nice. And then we're gonna move on to the next section, which is we're talking about the early days of like your service. And then, in which branch of the military did you serve in?
I served in the Signal Corps in the Army Signal Corps.
And then, did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was drafted. I was drafted in the first month that Selective Service was drafting married men.
And then, what were your first thoughts when they drafted you in? Were you like nervous or like what?
I was nervous and unhappy to be drafted.
Yeah.
I had a wife and I had a good job, and so I had to give up a lot.
Yeah. But I guess you could, I'm sorry to say this, but I guess it might be kind of nice to make you feel like maybe you're fighting for a country that you love, probably. Do you feel that way?
Did I feel which?
Like, oh, were you happy that knowing that, like, oh, you were, like, fighting for your country and all? And
Well, of course, yes. That it entered into my mind that I would be fighting for my country.
Alright. And then, what happened when you departed for a training camp and during your early days of training?
Okay. I left Water Valley where I was called up and went to Jackson, Mississippi. From there, I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
From there, I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
which is outside of Augusta, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through basic training there for 6 months, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I was shipped to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
and entered radio repair school. And I was there for approximately 7 months,
Mm-hmm.
in which I completed the training for radio repair, and also I was an instructor in the
Mm-hmm.
school there for about 3 months, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
From there, I was transferred to Korea by way of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to Korea around the 27th of March
Mm-hmm.
in 1953.
Mm-hmm.
And I was assigned to the 7th Infantry Division, and I was with them for the rest of my time in Korea, which was approximately 9 months.
Yeah.
I left Korea and I came into Incheon. On my way in, I went through Incheon on my way out.
Yeah.
And I got home about 10th or 15th of January of 1954, and I ended my service in Fort Smith, Arkansas,
Mm-hmm.
on about the 20th of January, 1954.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like as if you had a very eventful time.
While I was in Korea, I served about 1 month as a power man, keeping a Jeep.
Mm-hmm.
Generator
Mm-hmm.
going to provide power for the reserve area of the 7th Infantry Division.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I went back to the general, to the 7th Infantry Division that was located north of the 38th parallel
Mm-hmm.
in Korea. And when I went into service, I took a typing test.
Mm-hmm.
So they needed a type clerk, a clerk typist
Mm-hmm.
at the division signal office.
Mm-hmm.
I served in that capacity for a couple of months, and then the master sergeant that was a non-com in charge of the office rotated back to the States, and I was assigned his job. So I went to Korea as a private.
Mm-hmm.
The first month in that job, I was promoted to PFC. The next month, I was promoted to corporal, and the next month, I was promoted to sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
I was in charge of the division signal office non-coms, which consisted of 2 drivers and 2 clerks and myself.
Wow. Wow. And then, when you were mentioning like you were doing like training for like radio repair and all these things, like, can you explain to me like what the training was like for that? Cause like I just was like wondering like how would you like train for that?
Well, there's a lot of things you have to learn to do radio repair. You have to learn what resistors are, capacitors are, and many other things that are involved in the in the radio itself.
I don't really know what two of those are. And then did you recall your like instructors and then like what were they like and all?
They were first class as far as I was concerned.
Yeah. And then did you see, were there any of them that like stuck out to you, or were they like all like the same in uniform?
Well, I thought they were all very capable men. They knew what they were teaching, knew how to teach, and it was like going to any school where you learn fundamentals.
Yeah. Alright, and then did you receive any specialized training, like other than that?
No, I was selected as the student of the month one time there, and I was offered a commission if I wanted to stay in the Army for an additional period of time, which I turned down. So I would be going to officers training school.
And then, just out of curiosity, how did you adapt to military life, including the like physical regimen, the barracks, the food, and the social life?
Well, it's a matter of you have to exist. So I didn't fight it.
Yeah. Because I was just thinking, like, if I said peeking through my personally, if I got thrown into that, I'd be like, no, and I'd probably panic. And,
Well,
but
in the Army, you don't ask the reason why. After you've been through basic, you learn to follow instructions.
Tell them about your the social part with the.
you can talk.
Okay. Tell them about your social life while you were at Fort Mama.
While I was in service at Fort Mama, as well as when I was in training at Camp Gordon, Georgia, I met a bunch of other men in service that were, like myself, married, and we became very close. When I was transferred to Fort Gordon, Georgia, to Fort Mama, New Jersey, most of our wives were with us at that time. So we socialized together quite a bit.
Oh, that's kind of nice.
And we're still friends.
Oh, that's nice.
And we lived off base, so we were renters at that time.
Do you guys still keep in touch with them?
Yes.
At all?
There were 10 of us altogether, and now there are only 5 of us that are left. The other 5 have passed away.
And then, did the other 5 like pass away just like from like old age or?
Old age, yes.
And then, so, what are some of the when you like served abroad, what are some of the memories you have of that experience?
Well, I think it was landing in Incheon, and both, went in there and leaving Incheon, which was on Christmas Eve of 1953.
Mm-hmm.
Those were memorable occasions for me.
Yeah. I can imagine. And then,
Another one of the memorable occasions was when the colonel that I worked for, who was the division signal officer, allowed me to accompany him on a trip to a forward observation post located at the top of a mountain, and we looked down on a group of Chinese that were being attacked by an airplane.
mm-hmm.
So I guess within a mile away.
Mm-hmm. And then,
And another time when my company was attacked by an artillery gun miles away, I suppose, that killed one of our men and wounded another one. They shelled us as well as the division headquarters for about 3 nights in a row.
mm-hmm.
And then they must have they must have discovered where the gun was and got rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
So during that time we moved back to a rear area for security. And then we moved back when the gun was silenced.
And then, when you saw these like combats and all, how did you feel when witnessing these awful casualties and destruction?
Well, I guess I was happy to see them being destroyed, because they were the main reason that we were in Korea.
And also from like the other point, like when you saw like your comrades, getting wounded beside you, did that fuel your anger, or did you just accept it as like a part of it, a part of the war?
Well, I think it was just part of the war.
Yeah. Right, and then, how did you stay in touch with your family and friends back home during the war?
With who?
With like your friends and family, because I was wondering, like, did you like send them like letters and all? And
Well, there were, one of the friends was in the same outfit I was in.
mm-hmm.
Another one came by occasionally because he was a communication repairer.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw several, and also there was another friend that was in the same company I was in.
I don't think he understood that you meant friends back home. Right.
Yeah.
Friends and family back home.
Oh, well, I wrote a lot of letters, and I got a lot of letters from, especially my wife.
Every day he wrote to me and his parents.
Oh,
Sweet.
that's very sweet. Because it's always nice to remember the people that you came from and the people that are always close to you.
Right.
We didn't even have the telephone then
Right.
to communicate.
Yeah, and what do you do for recreation, or when you were off duty, and what do you do for recreation now?
Well, when I was off duty in Korea, there was nothing to do. And I really was not off duty because it was a 7-day-a-week job.
Oh.
And for recreation, I played golf for about 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally had to give it up year before last when I got Parkinson's disease
Mm-hmm.
and couldn't maneuver around the golf course.
Just out of curiosity, were you a good golfer?
Well,
Do you think you were pretty good at golf?
I can make a few pars every once in a while.
And then, where were you when the war ended?
I was in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
The war ended in July of 1954.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember, I didn't get there in 1953.
Yeah.
I didn't get there until the end of March
Yeah.
of 53. So I was a short-termer in Korea when the war ended.
Yeah.
I was at the headquarters of the 7th Infantry Division north of Taegwon-e,
Mm-hmm.
Korea, above the 38th parallel.
Yeah. How did you feel when you received the news? Because I bet you were ecstatic that you.
Very happy, very happy.
Yeah.
Because although I had about 9 more months or 8 more months to serve in Korea, I was happy.
Yeah. And you probably have to return back home and be reunited.
I'm sorry.
I said at least you got to be reunited and.
Oh yeah, well, as I say, I didn't leave Korea until the Christmas Eve of 1953,
Mm-hmm.
and I got home in January of 54.
Tell her about when you called me the first time when you reached the States that I didn't recognize your voice.
Okay. When I arrived in Seattle, Washington,
Mm-hmm.
that was the first time I had an occasion to call my wife, and she didn't recognize my voice.
He had gotten an accent from being in Korea with. He's a Southern guy, and so these guys he worked with were from other northern states, and I didn't recognize his voice. It was terrible.
Wow. It's amazing how much because the thing is,
Mhm.
I actually am reading into a little bit of psychology, and it's amazing because it's like or actually your brain actually, whenever you listen to other people talking in a different accent, your brain processes that and takes it in because it's like part of our like human instincts to like help blend in with like other people and all. And I think that's kind of
It's
interesting.
Yeah.
The only action I saw in Korea was when I went to the forward outpost with the colonel, and then when we were shelled and lost one of our men, and one was wounded, but he was returned to the company after a few weeks.
Yeah. Were you very close to this person, or were you guys just?
I knew both of them, but I wasn't that close to them because they were radio repairmen. And I never repaired a radio while I was in service.
Oh.
You built a radio though.
Yes,
That really
that
worked.
was part of my schooling to build a radio, and I did, and it worked.
That's cool. Just out of curiosity, did it take like a long time for you to build it, or are they like quick, like, I don't know, hour jobs you can do to build one?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand.
Just out of curiosity, like when you build a radio, does it take like a full day, or does it take like
How long
a
did it
week,
take
or-
you to build the radio?
Well, I built it while I was going to school, so it probably took me a couple of days.
Wow. Alright, and then, when you returned home, like after you called your wife and all, what's the first thing you did?
Well, I rode a train from Seattle, Washington to Fort Smith, Arkansas, and my wife met me there, and I was on leave for about a week, I guess, before I had to go back and be relieved of duty.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, I was used to greet my parents and friends.
That's nice. How were you received by your family and community? And like, how did they like act and like feel when you returned?
As far as I know, they felt relieved and happy that I was home.
As they should be.
You should let me tell that part of the story. Okay.
And then, did you readjust to civilian life when you got back?
Yes, I did. I got out of the service on about a Friday and went back to work with a utility company on Monday.
That's a very quick turnover. I'm impressed. You mentioned that you have remained in contact with fellow veterans, and may you please tell us their names?
Marvin Hamby, Mel Shemp, James Curry,
Orville Thorson.
Orville
Thorson.
Thorstenson, Eddie Dowd,
Everett Johnson.
Everett Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see. We have had very many reunions with them through the years. At one time we were meeting periodically, and then we started meeting every year for reunions at different locations.
Mm-hmm.
So they were close friends, and of course I'm sorry to see them go.
Yeah. When you guys meet for these periodic meetings, do you guys ever talk about the war?
A little bit. Most of them were not in the infantry per se, because they had MOSs that were primarily radio repairmen, radio repairmen, radar repairmen. And as such, they were those jobs that served as necessary to the fighting men.
And are you a member of any veteran organizations?
Yeah, I'm a member of the
Forever Young.
Forever Young organization here in Colleyville.
Oh. And what have you done since separating from the military other than, you know, continuing your job and just like living out your normal life?
Okay. Most of the time I've done that. I told you I went back to Memphis Lake Gas and Water and Customer Accounting Department. I've eventually moved to the Rate Department, then back as Supervisor of Customer Accounting, and then I became Superintendent of Customer Accounting. Then I became Controller, and then I became Chief Administrative Officer, and then ended up my service as Secretary Treasurer at Memphis Light Gas and Water. I served altogether 34 years with them. Then I went to work for Loomis Sales, LOOMIS, which is an investment management firm out of Boston. And I worked for them for 11 years, most of the time here in the Memphis office, then for about 18 months in the Washington, D.C. office. Then they moved the office, and I retired from there. Then they moved the office back to Memphis again. I went back to work for them for a year, so I had 11 years service with them. And after a year with them here in Memphis, I retired for good.
And I guess you're happy now because, you know, you've got some pretty good, nice accomplishments along the way, and now you can just kind of unwind.
Beg your pardon?
I said now I bet you're happy you can just unwind and not have to.
Well, I've been retired since 1996, I guess.
Yeah.
Been living in Colleyville since 1993, when we moved back here from Washington, D.C. And we became members of the Colleyville United Methodist Church and have been loyal to it ever since.
How has your wartime experiences affected your life?
My work life, well, I became a CPA while I was working at Memphis Light Gas and Water Division, and I guess my life has been wrapped around numbers and reports.
No. And did you learn any life lessons from your military service?
Did I learn something?
Yeah. Well, I'm saying, like, did you learn any like life lessons?
Well, I guess I did. I learned how to follow orders, not to question all of those orders when I received them. And I learned the reason and necessary for teamwork, and it helped me a great deal, like gas and water, in my career.
How has military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Well, of course, I think we should try our best to avoid war because it has many costs associated with it.
Yeah.
In fact, during the Korean War,
Mhm.
the American casualties were 33,629 that were killed, and 105,785 were wounded,
Mhm.
out of the 1,319,000 that had served in the Korean conflict. The South Korean Army
Mhm.
lost 415,000 killed and 429,000 wounded. The British Commonwealth, which included Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand,
Mhm.
lost 1,263 people killed and 4,817 that were wounded.
Mhm.
Belgium, Colombia, Ethiopia, France, Greece, Holland, the Philippines, Thailand, and Turkey, among them, lost 1,800 killed and 7,000 wounded, of which almost one half were Turks.
Mhm.
The Americans estimated that more than 1 million Chinese and North Koreans had died during that.
Yeah.
So
It was brutal.
this was a basic war between communism and capitalism,
Yeah.
with the North Koreans being linked to communism, and of course the South Koreans linked to capitalism. And you can see what has happened to the countries in the interim period of time where South Korea has advanced remarkably in the financial field,
Mhm.
whereas North Korea is still trending to be, well, not trending to be, they are communist.
Yeah.
This was primarily a war between America and Russia.
Mhm.
Russia had dominated North Koreans,
Mhm.
and they probably are the ones that told them to start the fight.
Yeah.
And Americans were fighting communism all during that time, and of course felt like they had to defend South Korea against the North Koreans.
Yeah.
And things have not changed that much in the last, 60 years?
Yeah. And like, how do you feel about like if you've been like listening to the news lately about like our current president and like the things kind of getting heated between us and North Korea? How do you feel about that?
Between us and them?
Yeah, because I know, if I remember correctly, didn't say in the news that our current president went to go talk to Kim Jong-un. Did you guys see that?
Well, I think those of us who have lived a long time realize that Russia hasn't changed its stripes since World War II,
Yeah.
and that we should do everything we can to defeat them and their purpose.
Yeah. And then, what message would you like to leave for future generations who will view or hear this interview?
Well, of all the people that were killed during the Korean conflict, the country was not worth all of the deaths that occurred during that time. So when you fight a war, you should try to win it, because let me tell you what the division general of the 7th Infantry Division said when the armistice was signed.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "I was happy it was over. It was apparent that all we were going was go on losing more lives. In the last few months, I lost men faster than Westmoreland at any stage of the Vietnam War except Tet. The U.S. Infantry, 7th Infantry Division was involved in the last major battle of the Korean conflict at Old Baldy and Pork Chop Hill, where the losses were probably extreme on both sides." Is that all the questions that you have?
Just out of curiosity, have you seen any of the movies that have been made after the Korean War? Because, for example, like I know they made one like based on Pork Chop Hill, and a couple others that I researched for my Korean War paper was like MASH and what was the other movie's name called?
Well, I never had the opportunity to visit a MASH outfit while I was in service, thank goodness.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the war was probably defined very well in Pork Chop Hill, because it was close combat in many instances, especially when the Chinese came across the Yellow River to meet the United Nations forces.
Mm-hmm.
That was terrorism at its worst, because a lot of it was close combat too.
Yeah. And just to wrap things up, do you have anything else you would like to discuss about from your wartime experience?
Well, I guess that Washington and Moscow basically were very much involved in discussions about what went on in the war, because at the end the Americans pushed back against the Chinese and North Koreans so they could get to the original line between North and South Korea. As I say, some of us were above the 38th parallel. So no doubt that was to make sure that when the armistice was signed, that the line of demarcation was still in effect. After, 3 years of fighting.
Yeah, and the thing is we have a map here of the, like North Korea and South Korea. Isn't that the line right there? The dotted line right there?
Yes, that's it. Demarcation line. And when I was there, we were just above the 38th parallel. That's where the 7th Infantry Division was.
Yeah.
During the early, in the first year, the North Koreans drove against the South Koreans to down into Busan area.
Market.
Right.
Right here?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, hold up. Here it is.
Of course, that was before the Chinese got involved. And had it not been for the 8th Army that was headquartered in Japan and headed by MacArthur, they sent in troops to stop the advance of the North Koreans. And MacArthur came up with a plan to go in Incheon and entrapped the North Koreans down in this area between two forces.
Yeah. Kind of like to sandwich them together.
Adventures, yeah.
And not let them escape, to kind of surround them.
So then the American forces banded together and they pushed them up to right around the border with China.
Yeah.
President Harry Truman of the U.S. had told MacArthur not to go that far, but he did, and of course later on the president relieved MacArthur of his duties, which I think he should have, because we did not want an all-out war with China. Because I'm not sure anybody could beat China in a war with their many people and their multiple locations.
Yeah.
So
Kyle, do you have any other more questions you would like to ask?
You were talking about the story when he returned home. Do you want to share that story?
Oh, the morning, the afternoon before, the night before I was to go to Fort Smith to meet him for the first time. We had an ice storm, snow and ice storm. My uncle and aunt were going to drive me to Fort Smith from Memphis. I had lived with them while he was in service. So we got across the Mississippi River Bridge and we heard on the radio that the bridge was closed.
Oh no.
So we barely got into Arkansas, and took us all day to just creep along. Cars were in the ditches and the traffic was terrible. Ice got up under the wheels and we had to stop and get it all cleaned out and whatever. We finally got to the base and I literally just flew out of that car right into his arms. And that was just
Aw.
the most exciting day of our lives, probably except the day that we got married. So that was an interesting experience for both of us, actually, because they were anxious. He was anxiously waiting for us to get there, and not knowing whether we would or not. So anyway,
There were two other wives
Right, with us.
that were with you that
Right.
were returning. One was James
Curry's wife. Yeah. We were. It was an interesting experience for sure.
That makes me so happy to think about, because the weather tried to hold you guys back, but you guys
Yeah.
wouldn't let it. Yeah. And then, do you guys have, Kyle, do you have any more questions than that?
That's it.
And would it be okay if we took a picture of your notes, or
Sure.
would? I have it. It's okay. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. Thank you.
I covered most.
You want to just leave those with her, or you don't want to take them home with
Well, I'd like to keep them.
you?
Yeah. I can just take a picture of them. I'm kind of one of those people that's picky about whether or not the paper is aligned in the photo, so you have to bear with me.
But they were very much involved in the war. And strafing the enemy, and because there weren't that many major targets for them to hit other than the enemy and their vehicles.
Yeah.
Maybe a railroad or two.
Yeah. Because I feel like, based on what I've read from like history and all, I feel like if it hadn't been for them, and for that kind of actual like push towards us winning the war, I feel like if it hadn't been for them, then we would have kind of been hopeless. Because I feel like they were just a very beneficial big part of it, And although every single part of the war that we've read about and research and all, I feel like it's like all working together like one big clock, And
Yes.
everything goes hand in hand with each other, no matter like how small or how big the job may be.
Very, very much so. But it was great to have help from the United Nations forces, although they only had about 2,300 men, 23,000 men. Let's see. About 23,000 people that were involved in the war with the British and Australia and Canada and New Zealand and Australia being the major forces from other countries. So, I'm glad you asked me about this because I've spent the last 4 weeks studying this book. Because as you know, I was only there for about, let's see, March until July when the armistice was signed.
Yeah.
So
Did you tell her the route that that they sent you on to get you there?
no. Since I was stationed at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, we came home for Christmas. We drove home from up there on Christmas.
Yeah.
While I was gone, I got orders to report to a base in New Jersey to ship out. And of course, most people shipping out were going to Korea. But we were shipped out of Jersey City, New Jersey, and on board a ship, a troop ship. We went to Puerto Rico to deliver some Puerto Ricans that were shipping home from Korea, and picking up some more that were going to the southeast anyway. Went through the Panama Canal, went to Honolulu for one night. And then we went to Tokyo, the Yomaha, to the replacement depot there. From there I was sent to Korea. So it took me from about the 20th of January to the end of March to get there.
Wow.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That's quite a road trip if I could call it that.
I tell some of the Navy personnel that I run into, I said, I've got more time on board a ship than you have.
And you were sick half the time.
Okay, is that all you need from me?
I think so, unless you have anything else you would like to add.
I don't think I have anything else to add.
Alright then, I guess should say we're done here.
Okay,
You're
thank you.
free to leave.